Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Church Windows User Group webinar for printing checks, check printing. My name is Joshua, and I'm going to be your presenter today. We're going to work for about the next 20 minutes or so, maybe less. This may not be that lengthy of a topic here. On our check printing and accounting screen here today, or check printing in accounting module today. Just if for those of you that have never attended one of our user group webinars before, in the upper left or right of your control panel there, you'll see the little arrow, red or orange arrow pointing left or right. Click on that to minimize the control panel for the webinar. That gets it out of the way. Allows you to get a full visual effect of the webinar here today, or if you've got a dual monitor set up, just go ahead and drag that control panel off to your second desktop just to, again, get it out of the way. Rachel's going to be answering questions for me today. We do keep everyone muted. If you do have a question about the topic today, go ahead and type those in the questions portion of the webinar. She will try to respond to those as quickly as humanly possible. She may, refer you to or ask you to contact technical support about questions, about a question you have, not because she doesn't want to answer it, but frequently that's when we need more information and contacting technical support, so we can get the information we need as the next course of action. So again, just, don't be shocked if she says, hey, this is a question you need to contact support with, and of course we'll be delighted to help. Again, wherever we are at 20 minutes after the hour, I'm going to wrap up what I'm talking about. We'll certainly be happy to stick around and answer questions. Again, folks, as we ask every webinar event, please, try to keep the questions topical. This is specifically about check printing today, so we would ask that you do keep your questions to that if at all possible. We have other webinars that are scheduled on other topics and other resource information at our website. Everyone should be able to see my our website now, webpage, and just an FYI for you, we strongly recommend looking at the support blog and the CW version 17 resources page. Those are the blog page and the CW version 17 resources have lots and lots of information that are available. In addition to that, please look at the user group webinar page here for our current list of events, including all of those that we have for the rest of April. We have a number this week, so there'll be, take a look at this page to see if there's something there, something else, another topic that you can join us for. We'll always be delighted to help. All right, well, let's get back to our topic here. Our current version of Church Windows is version 17.14.3. That's listed here in the upper right. Everybody should see my poorly drawn arrow there in the top right pointing to our version. Our developers are hard at work on 17.14.4 right now. We'll probably have that out here between now and the end of April. Definitely includes some important bug fixes and problems. So when that is released, look for an email from us. Okay. So we're going to talk strictly about check printing. So the assumption here is, and as we click on our print checks window, I've got 3 checks here, computer prepared checks that are waiting in the print queue to print that I've pre-built into the data for us today just to save us some time. But it is important to be aware that the only checks that will show up in our check print check screen in Church Windows Accounting are those where we've gone into pay bills or asset transfers and the computer check has been chosen as the method of payment. And what I mean here is when we get to our, back to our pay bills window, when we click our down arrow next to our payment method for either each individual item or for the default payment method, the transaction as it is posted here has computer check as its payment method, okay? So that's a very common support call is, hey, I posted my payments and I want to print the checks, and I go over to my print checks window and they're not there. 99 times out of 100 we go back into the look at the specific transaction, and sure enough a different payment method was selected for the for the payment transaction, whether it was EFT or manual check or something, but simply the wrong payment method was chosen. There are not reported issues or bugs about those about computer checks not appearing in the print queue. However, if you do go in and you verify that there are computer checks and they don't have check numbers and yet they're still not appearing here, please pick up the phone and call us. We're happy to look at that with you. Okay. Church Windows has two default check types: check stub stub and stub check stub. That's it. There are no other check types that Church Windows supports. We get a very common question from folks is, well, can I print 3 checks per page? No. Simply the system, I'm just putting that out there completely bluntly, is the system software requires that for record-keeping purposes that one stub be included with the check to send to your vendor, and there is another check, a stub that is retained for your records for the church. Okay, so the system only supports 1 check per page with 2 stubs in one of these 2 formats. Okay. Now, of course, there can be some minor deviations or differences between the 3-part check, essentially, that as long as it's one of these 2 formats, every check type is just a little bit different, and when that's the case, that's where we then have to consider using the feature to the right labeled check designer in order to be able to go in and manipulate the layout so it works for us, whether it's printing them to your printer properly and they're coming out of the printer correctly, or maybe whether they're lining up in your windowed envelopes correctly. Whatever reason we need to, we can go into this check designer function here, very similar to our other report designer features, whether it's the donation statements and donations or our new membership reporting features, that simply allows us to manipulate the layout of our checks for whatever reason, And here we are at our report designer, our check designer, with our stub, check, stub. So the check falls in the middle, and we notice there's no grid there. We see the grid at the top for the top stub, and we see the little grid lines for the bottom stub with the non-grid check in the middle here. Okay, our stub check or check stub would be similar, except that the check would be on top, okay, right up here, and then the 2 stubs would be at the bottom. There is different information on these 2 stubs. Okay, the top stub in our invoice information was really meant to go with the check, and since the expense information that is relevant to your expense accounts in accounting, we really designed the bottom stub to be retained for the church's records. Okay. To be put with your paperwork or what have you, so if there are any questions about that check, we can pull out the stub and see exactly what it showed on that, whether it's questions from the vendor or internal questions that we have. But the main reason why I'm really here is a couple different things. Like, one of the common support calls that I deal with a good deal of the time is if notice we've got the check number and check number fields that are printing on our top stub. We don't have the check number printing on the check itself. The assumption there is that the check numbers are pre-printed, and the same is true on our bottom stub. Okay, but you can remove those fields if you wish. So if your stubs also have the check number printed on them, maybe you want to come in here and go ahead and say, okay, I don't want to show the checks numbers on my stubs or on my checks at all because my check numbers are pre-printed on all portions of my check. And the reason why I recommend this is because if for one reason or another you're in the middle of your check run, you print them, we grab them off the printer, we look at them and we go, oh, they picked up the wrong check or they printed out a sequence or what have you. Okay, well, if that's the case, we still have presentable checks. We just then have to associate the correct check number with the proper payee and amount in accounting, which we can do. If the check numbers on your pre-printed checks are different from the ones that Church Windows prints, then our bank might have a problem with those. Okay, well, they're going, which check number do I honor? Okay, which one do we record in our system as the one that we should put on the transaction? So if there is a problem with the check numbers and how they're sequenced, we can fix that in Church Windows, but only if your checks come pre-printed with the actual physical check numbers on them. Does that make sense? If I really want to look and see what it looks like now, as I can with virtually all of our report designer features, I can go down to the preview button here in the lower left. This will then open up a preview of my check layout, and we notice here neither of my stubs nor my check actually includes the physical check number on it. Okay? This is a really, this could save you certainly some money, and certainly maybe save you some time on reordering your checks, maybe a little less often. Maybe it won't impact any of you, but I'm just an FYI for me, where in through my support calls that I work on, a lot of accounting calls with folks is you have full control over which check numbers are assigned to which check, presuming that the checks themselves are considered presentable to the vendor or the payee and your bank. Okay? We can fix church windows to do anything we want. Okay? I can't fix the check. Okay? That becomes the real, where things become set in stone, is when the checks themselves are printed, are not presentable. We can't present the check and expect them to be cashed. All right, so again, toggling back and forth between this preview and this designer will allow you to make changes to your check layout and without saving the changes, okay? So while this is our data, it does let you look and see what they look like. So you could send this to your printer. We could overlay it over one of our checks, on plain paper, overlay it over one of the checks, hold it up to the light and see how the alignment works, okay? Another common use of the report designer that we'll hear from users is, well, my payee address right here in the middle isn't lining up with my window on my windowed envelopes right here. Okay, that can be also again manipulated. All right, and just like anything on these checks, so I go, okay, I need to move it down or up. We can sit there and go, okay, I can pick up that field. I can now move that down. And notice here it's like appearing right above my memo. Again, toggling back to my preview box. I can print this to plain paper, put that on a plain sheet of paper, put it in one of my windowed envelope format envelopes and see how it looks. Okay? So even more so, a lot of times I've even had support calls where folks go, well, my my actual physical numeric dollar amount appears to the right and I want my written dollar amount to be center or left justified. Well, we notice here the written amount is right justified. So if I again click on that field, I can simply go up to my left at the very top up here. Everybody should see my floating help message right at the top. And notice now my written amount now appears on the left side. So it justifies it on the left, not the right over here, as opposed to over here before. Okay? So I'm just kind of quickly trying to walk you through what can be quickly and easily manipulated as part of your checks to perhaps make them again better, cleaner, more presentable, as the case may be. Okay? Once you've gone to your preview, the alignment is exactly the way that you're wanting. You can either go up to Save As in the top left, or when I simply attempt to click Close in the top right, it will prompt me to enter a name for my layout. Okay. So church windows, the system will not let you overwrite stub, check stub, nor the check stub stub. The defaults have to be there. So if I try to click yes through this, it'll bark at me. See the red flashing dot there to the right of the line? It's telling me I have to give this a different name. Okay, I'll call this something like my checks or my check. And then we click OK. So here we are now, and notice it's automatically choosing that layout in the actual check layout at the very top. It's the one I created. It assumes it's the one that I want to use. I still have my stub, check stub, and my check stub stub there, but the one called my check is now there, okay, in the list. And until I change it, it should be the one that's chosen there all the time, anytime. Okay, that should be the one that's just there. Again, very common question. There's 3 dates that are involving your payments and your checks, your bills, payments, and checks. There's the date of the bill, there's the date of the payment, and then you can even have a third date, which is the date on your check. Okay, now this doesn't show up in association with the actual transactions in accounting, but just an FYI. It's going to default to today's date or the date of the payments themselves, but you certainly can have a different date on the check than either the bill or the payment transaction. It's a really important thing to understand. A lot of folks get confused by that. Okay, well, but my date on my check, okay, Yeah, great. The date on the check is completely different from the date of the payment of the bill. So you can come in here and enter a date, that's completely different from those two transactions. Okay, FYI. Also, you can of course enter a memo for each one of my checks if I wish. So right here for Ameritech, I can put in, my test comments, and that will simply appear, personalized comments will appear in the memo line of just that check to Ameritech. You also do have, of course, the ability to be able to pick and choose which checks you print. Okay, so here I've got the 3 check boxes down the left side down here. Okay, let's say I don't want to print the one to, say, American Electric Power in the middle, so I can simply remove the check mark from AEP. Okay, and then when I go down and enter my starting check number and hit enter or tab, it now will skip over the check that I don't want to print. I have full control here. Okay, so notice here, even when I checked that box from AEP, it automatically resequenced and entered the new check number for me. So the system does its best to try to help you. Okay, all right, so final thing here, like I said, it's not a very terribly long or complicated topic, but I think it's an important one because I may be showing you some things that you're unaware of about this today. Again, you might have different assets with different checks to print. So if I did have 2 or more checking accounts that did have different checks to print, I would have to run 2 check runs essentially, one for one bank, one for the other. When you're ready to actually physically print the checks, it does open up our print preview, page 1 of 3 in the lower left corner down here. Again, my poorly drawn arrow. There's the number of checks that were actually going to be physically printed. Okay, so then I would put my check stock in the printer and I would simply click the print button in the top left here, and we are going to go ahead and we're going to assume this is going to be, we're kind of tricking it into going to our check printing screen here. All right, so I want to cancel out of that. I'm not printing anything. I've just sent it to a printer driver essentially. And folks, this is probably one of the most important steps here is when you close out of the print preview after you've clicked print, it asks this question: did the checks print correctly? Please don't answer this question until you've grabbed the checks off the printer and you've examined them. Okay? Not only for amounts, but did their checks numbers assigned properly? Are the checks themselves considered good and presentable? Okay? Because if I say no to that, it opens up a window and it says, indicate which checks, if any, printed correctly. Okay, don't misinterpret that for printed incorrectly. So if I go, okay, my, Columbia Gas and my AEP printed correctly, but my Ameritech did not, okay, I would just simply click OK. I would check those that did, leaving the one unchecked that I didn't. And once I click OK, it would remove everything else from the list except for the checks that I physically needed to print again. Okay, so I just, again, on support calls, I do hear a lot of folks who assume that their printer is printing the checks correctly, and then all of a sudden they have a problem and they don't. Because there's no way I can put the checks back in queue short of reversing the payment transaction, reversing the payment transactions, reposting a new payment, and putting another check back in the queue. When that previous window gives me the freedom and the flexibility to tell the system and save myself a lot of time and headache and work. Okay? All right, so with about another minute left, I'm getting a question here that's saying, can I explain the difference between comments when entered on the pay bill screen and comments on the print check screen? Well, sure. So if I just type something under my memo here, okay, oops, got to enter my check number here. Let's try to get that entered properly. The comments, the memo that I enter here will print right here on the physical check itself, okay? Right here on the actual physical check. Comments that I enter at pay bills will only show will show on the stubs, essentially, okay? They won't appear on the check. So, right here is my dividing line between my check, so the check falls in the middle. So the comments that are entered at pay bills will show up here and down here, but they will not print on the memo line on the check. So that's the fundamental difference, whether they appear on the check themselves or on the stub. Memo will only appear in the memo line on the physical check itself. Good question. All right, folks, it's 20 minutes after. I'm done talking about what I came here to talk about. Let me expand here and see if there's some questions I can help Aunt Rachel answer. Whoa, okay. Marva's asking, can I enter an address on the check printing screen? I'm afraid not. That's a good question. You can only enter that under the Vendor Payee tab at the Chart of Accounts. Barbara's saying, my comments don't show up on the check stubs. Okay, that means Barbara, they're most likely not then being recorded or using the insert feature at the pay bills window. Those comments that are not being brought over from your bills are not being brought over to the payment transactions correctly. Most likely. I'm speculating, but that's most likely what that means. Please call us if you have more questions about that. Can you put a different check number on the print check screen if a check did not print correctly, or does it have to be the same check number? Well, I'm only going to enter here, Gloria, whatever check number was actually on the physical check. But, if again all that happened was the checks printed incorrectly, I could go up to my transactions, browse, find my payment transactions that had the wrong check number, and I can correct it so it does associate the correct check number. Okay, but that means a correction to my current payment transaction. But sure, you can enter any check number you want at print checks. But I'm only ever going to enter their ones that are actually physically on the checks that I send. Kim's asking, so this check was given a new check number, right? Was the previous check number voided, right? You have to go in, well, actually, so if a check was, like in this case, one check was considered actually truly unusable. Now, if it skipped over the check sequencing, that doesn't mean I couldn't still associate that transaction with something else, okay? That's going to require that if a check actually is spoiled, I'd have to go up to transactions, other, and go to my enter spoiled check numbers or voided checks. So no, in that case, if the check was unpresentable, I do need to record that. That's a great question, Kim. Thank you. Check comments that are entered at our print checks window here in the field called memo, right here, the memo line between the amount and the check number will appear on the check itself, the physical check. Comments that are entered at our pay bills window here at pay bills, right over here on the right under comments at our pay bills, these will only appear on the stub. Can I get the reports to show the check number, the payments post report is printed before the checks have been assigned? Well, sure. Yeah, Peggy, sure, of course. You can go up either to your check register after those are printed and posted and print that, or sure, you can go up to your transactions, or browse, or your reports and run something like your general ledger or your transaction journal and include the check or reference number. You bet. Sure, yeah. I want two separate checks, but to the same vendor. It only prints one check. That is a change under version 17, Barbara, that not under print checks. Under pay bills, under version 17, I don't have anything here pending to show you here now, but there is an option now that's assuming the payments have the same date occurred, that you can tell the system to print two separate checks. That's actually covered in one of the version 17 accounting enhancements movies. Arlene's asking, what is the difference between comments line on the enter bills and pay bills? Well, there are different comments for different transactions. So, we may want to enter comments for the bill that we don't want to have necessarily associated with the payment. So the system, we're talking about two different transactions. So the system just, we may want comments to enter for one but not the other. Great questions. You're welcome. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there, folks. I appreciate you spending the additional 5 minutes here with us today. Amy's asking, how do we itemize two or more sums on the stub that make up the total amount of the... Well, the check stub, Amy, should be, assuming they're posting to two separate expense accounts or to different expense accounts, should show the separate amounts posted to each expense on the stub itself. But it will just show the amounts that were posted to each expense. If you have other questions about that, Amy, call us. We'll be happy to talk about it with you. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar for everybody here. We hope it's been helpful. You're very welcome, of course, and we hope to see you folks at another future Church Windows webinar. All right. Thank you all so much. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.